There is one question that every natural bodybuilder eventually asks, and this is why some people build more muscles than others. Two people can be training in the same gym, using the same equipment, eating more or less the same amount of food, putting the same effort, but still one grows much faster than another. So is it hard work? Is it discipline? Is it a diet? Is it genetics? And the truth is that natural bodybuilding is perhaps one of the most unequal biological processes in the human body. I have to say that natural bodybuilding is actually very unfair, simply because we are all different and all natural bodybuilders are different. So some have better natural genetic predispositions than others, and they are not actually entering the world of bodybuilding on the same starting position. The truth is that enhanced bodybuilder is much fairer when it comes to that, because enhanced bodybuilders are all on the equal field. They are all on the same plane because they take steroids. So when people take steroids, their starting line is the same. But with natural bodybuilders, story is different. Their starting position is not the same. And that may be the hardest truth to accept. Today, I am going to explain why some natural bodybuilders build far more muscles than others. We will discuss body types, genetics, hormones, muscle fibers, tendon insertions, anabolic threshold, nutrition, and ultimately answer one of the biggest questions in fitness. How much muscle can natural bodybuilder actually build? Because the biggest lie in bodybuilding is not that steroids work. The biggest lie in bodybuilding is that everybody has the same potential if they simply work hard enough. But unfortunately, biology doesn't work that way. Let me first talk about different body types. Now I know that many people simply dismiss somatotypes today, and it is true. They are not perfect scientific categories, but it still remains useful, something which is the practical framework. And this is that traditionally we divide body types into three categories: ectomorph, mesomorph, and endomorph. So ectomorphs are naturally thin. They have smaller joints, they have long limbs, they have lower appetite, and usually they have problems gaining weight. Mesomorphs are naturally muscular. They have wide shoulders, small waist, they are very muscle bound, they have a very good hormonal profile and also rapid recovery. So mesomorph will always grow much faster than ectomorph if they perform the same type of workout. Now endomorphs, they tend to store body fat more easily. Endomorphs usually have larger frames. They have wide shoulders but also have wider hips. They are usually stronger and relatively build muscles much easier. But you need to understand that destiny is not necessarily fixed when it comes to these different body types. For example, Arnold Schwarzenegger was clearly a mesomorphic individual, but he didn't have the best proportions and the best genetic abilities, like for example Sergio Oliva, who has the greatest mesomorphic structure in bodybuilding history. But then on the other side you have Frank Zane, who was also structurally different. He was between mesomorph and ectomorph. And all of these examples, all of these three giants of bodybuilding actually achieved the most that you can achieve in bodybuilding. They all won Mr. Olympia. So you need to understand that some people begin the race 10 meters ahead, while some begin the race 10 meters behind. And this is simply biology. Now let us discuss genetics. People often talk about it and mention genetics as an excuse that they could make it. But before we start blaming bad genetics, let us first understand what genetics in bodybuilding means. First of all, let's talk about muscle belly length. So some people have longer muscle bellies, and they usually happen to have all muscle groups perfectly developed, because all their muscle bellies on their arms or their chest, back, legs, calves, they are all perfect. People obviously like Sergio Oliva, Serge Nubre, Ronnie Coleman, they are perfect example of these long muscle bellies, because having long muscle bellies will allow you to build more muscle, obviously. Now, the second factor is tendon insertion. So depending on how far, how deep tendon is inserted in your muscle, that will determine the shape of your muscles. So, for example, some people have long calves, and they can really build massive calves because of the insertion of the calf in the ankle. But some people have much longer insertion, making that calf muscle shorter, and they can still build whatever they have muscle there. But the thing is that that muscle will never look the same as for someone who had shorter insertion. And that also applies to many different muscles, like, for example, biceps. Also back. Some people have very high insertion, and therefore their latissimus muscles, they start from the middle of their back. Some people have shorter insertion, therefore the latissimus dorsi muscle appears to be longer. So despite the development and optimal growth of that particular muscle, tendon insertion will decide about the overall shape and look of that particular muscle. Now, the third factor is skeletal structure. So some people have very wide clavicle, collarbone. Some people have shorter collarbone. Some people have very wide pelvis, and some people have narrower pelvis. So that will all actually contribute to that V shape. So this genetic, obviously, potential regarding skeletal structure determines how wide your body will be or how small your waist will be. So this is very important to understand, because it's obviously preferential to have wide collarbone and small pelvis that will contribute to perfect V shape. The fourth factor is muscle fiber distribution. Some individuals possess much higher percentage of fast twitch muscle fibers, which have much greater potential for growth. Some people possess a much higher percentage of slow twitch muscle fibers, and these people are usually much better in performing, for example, long distance running, like marathon running, while people who have a higher percentage of fast twitch muscle fibers are usually better for sprinting or bodybuilding. So this also contributes when it comes to genetic endowment. Now, the fifth factor is obviously satellite cell number. Satellite cells help muscles grow and repair. So some individuals have simply much more satellite cells than others, and that clearly contributes to final product. And finally, this is the androgen receptor density. Not everybody responds to testosterone equally. Two people can produce the same amount of testosterone, but one will respond better than another. And the reason for that is because they have much higher androgen receptor density. So they respond much better to testosterone. You can also have two people, for example, who are enhanced, take the same amount of testosterone. One grows much faster than another. And this is especially important when it comes down to natural bodybuilding, because this is one of the factors that determines your genetic predisposition. There is another important subject that we need to discuss and understand, and these are hormones. So hormones play a major role in determining muscular potential. Now, the first, obviously, as you probably all know, is testosterone. Testosterone is generally understood as a hormone that causes the greatest muscle building capacity. So testosterone is critical, but is not the only hormone. There are other hormones which are also very important, like, for example, growth hormone. Then you have insulin growth factor 1, known as AGF1, again, extremely important. Another thing to consider is insulin sensitivity, which matters tremendously. I spoke about it in many videos, and how you can increase that insulin sensitivity via training and also via diet. Then you have cortisol and even thyroid hormones. So all these hormones are important, and different people can have them in different balance, can produce some of them in lesser amounts, some of them in higher amounts. And that will obviously be yet another factor that will decide how fast you will grow. Now we arrive at the topic that almost nobody discusses, and this is the anabolic threshold. So every individual possesses a different threshold for stimulating muscle growth. So some people grow from almost everything. As you've seen, people do 10 sets and they grow. People even do wrong form and they grow. People do high intensity training and they still grow. Some people are simply like that. They recover quickly and they just grow. They have no issues, no problems. And these are usually people who come back and say, oh, I'm not training like you're advising and I'm progressing fantastically. The reason for that is that some people, they're not majority, but there are some people who have this anabolic threshold very high. So they can do whatever it takes, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. They will perform much better than somebody who does everything right but is not growing as much as expected. Now, that threshold is very complex and depends on many different factors. So, first of all is genetics, as I explained earlier on more in detail about genetic factors. Now, the second one is stress. If you have two people, natural bodybuilders, one who has developed chronic stress because he's always stressed, work, family, other circumstances, but the other one is less stressed. The one with less stress will definitely progress much faster, that person will have higher anabolic threshold. Then also you have age. Anabolic threshold depends on age. When you're younger, your anabolic threshold is higher. So when I was younger, I even did wrong things. I was training wrong, my diet wasn't perfect, but I was growing much faster than later on. So clearly age matters. So as you age, you should understand that your training, your nutrition, your stress management, your lifestyle have to be much more accurate, much more precise, and that will compensate the age. Age is not a problem, but is the factor. Then also you have hormones. They decide about that anabolic threshold, as I explained. Then recovery. If you don't recover properly, you will simply reduce anabolic threshold. You need to recover, and recovery is a critical thing, especially when it comes to training. And I will have a few words about that in a minute. Then you have sleep. You need to sleep because only during sleep your central nervous system recovers. And if you don't sleep enough, if you sleep 4 or 5 hours every night, that will be very difficult for your system to recover. And obviously you will lower that anabolic threshold. Also, previous training history. People who have been in training for 10, 15, 20 years, obviously they increase the anabolic threshold because their bodies completely adapt to the new stress levels, training, nutrition. They are more into that, and they will have that anabolic threshold much higher than somebody who just started. So this is another factor that explains the importance of this anabolic threshold. And all this have been said suggests and explains why you should not copy somebody else's programs. This is why so many times people came back and said, there is no way that I can train like Serge Nubre. I can't train like Arnold. I can't train like you. And I never said that you should. I even have the videos in which I said you should not train like Serge Nubre. So you should not copy other people's training programs, but you should use them as principles. So if the principles of all successful bodybuilders was high volume training, you should gear rather towards high volume training, because most people and most professional bodybuilders and most naturals have achieved best results by doing high volume training. So instead of doing 5-6 sets per muscle group, you should be better doing 15 to 20 sets or maybe higher. So you have the principle there. Not necessarily you should copy. One of the reasons just been explained, and this is anabolic threshold, which is different in different individuals depending on genetics, hormones, stress levels, sleep, age, etc., as I just explained. So the greatest mistake that natural bodybuilders make is assuming that they should be training the same as professional bodybuilders or others, whoever they are, even natural bodybuilders who are more successful. So you should not be copying anybody. You should be listening, researching, taking advice from people who are knowledgeable and experienced and hopefully who have done something in the sport. Not as so many of these influencers on YouTube who never did anything in the sport, never written a single page of anything, not to mention an article or a book, and obviously not having necessarily enough knowledge to give you advice. So you have to be very careful where are you getting information from, because selection of information is more important than information itself. I know that it's not easy, but I'm suggesting and I'm trying in my videos to give you the best possible explanations, straightforward, down to earth, practical information that you should consider and eventually create your own training system and or your own nutritional plan in order to fit that into your genetic predispositions, into your lifestyle, into your goals. Now, again, I have to say that training is probably the biggest mistake that natural bodybuilders make. In order to make quick changes as soon as possible, they usually tend to overtrain themselves. How do they overtrain themselves? First of all, they're using weights which are too heavy. Those weights will never give you enough freedom and potential to train in perfect form, and you will simply be laboring in the gym. You will not be developing muscles. So weights which are too heavy are your biggest nemesis. The second problem with training is that natural bodybuilders usually train with very high intensity, meaning they're training to failure. Every set, every exercise, every single time in the gym, they're screaming, they're lifting some weights, trying to achieve impossible, which is completely incompatible with natural physiologies. You cannot do that. You will never succeed doing that. Nobody has ever done it, especially natural bodybuilders. I have trained thousands of natural bodybuilders. My son is a natural bodybuilder. They all develop perfectly as much as their genetic potential allowed them to develop. And they didn't do that high intensity. They never did go to failure. And I don't advise them simply because you will not be able to recover from that type of training. Enhanced bodybuilders are different. They, or especially super genetically gifted plus enhanced, they can get away with anything, like Dorian Yates and many similar. There are few bodybuilders who train very high intensity, which, by the way, pay huge price by injuring themselves terribly. Those injuries basically put them in a disability categories. And yes, you will progress up to the point, but as natural, you will not last like that. That is the worst thing that you can do. Again, even professional bodybuilders are not going to failure today because they understood the benefits and the risks. And they are intelligent enough, most of them, not to do it. So training to failure is definitely the biggest mistake that you can do as a natural bodybuilder. Also, another modern advice, I don't know why and how that became like a mantra, and this is training too frequently or training every muscle twice per week. Sometimes people, influencers, whoever, gods, they advise even 3 times per week. Small sessions, low number of sets, but 2-3 times per week with some pseudo-scientific explanations and proofs. That is not going to work. You need to exercise every muscle once per week. I've done so many videos on that, and you can go back to my channel and find those videos in which I explain more in detail. So I just don't want to repeat myself again. So what natural bodybuilders require when it comes to training, number one is adequate volume. Then progressive overload. But progressive overload is not just blindly attempting to lift heavier and heavier every single session. Progressive overload means that you follow the right number of reps, close to failure, and right number of sets, and then when you pass that threshold of recommended number of reps in the first set, there is the time to increase the weight gradually, maybe for 5%, keeping the form perfect. So this is the only progressive overload that works for naturals, but also for enhanced. And I have done the video on that as well and explain what progressive overload really is and really means. Then recovery. You need to recover from your sessions because muscle doesn't grow during the training session. Muscle grows during recovery. During training sessions, you break down muscles. They repair and they grow during recovery. Then you have consistency. Consistency means you have to be patient. Even golden era bodybuilders didn't build their bodies in a couple of years. It took decades to build those bodies. So take your time, be consistent, listen to your body, recover properly, and obviously you need to have a proper exercise selection. I often see natural bodybuilders training all these fantastic modern, some cable exotic exercises just invented recently, and they go nowhere with it because the sheer amount of stress on the muscle that you're targeting is very low. They are sold under the name of biomechanics or most effective training system and most effective exercises, which is absolutely not true. You need to rely on basic exercises as natural bodybuilder because you need to stress that muscle as much as possible by using compound exercises. So legs, we are talking squats, hack squats, leg press, chest, all kind of presses, incline, decline, straight, dips, back, pull-ups, pull-downs, rowing movements, shoulders, shoulder press, upright rows, etc. So stick to the basic exercises, and this is the best selection of exercises for a natural bodybuilder. I also talk about it in many of my videos, and I have so many programs in which I advise people on 3-day training split, 4-day training split, and 5-day training split, and I advise on best, most effective exercises in those training splits. And now we arrive at nutrition. This is another factor which is extremely important for optimizing your genetic potential. So whatever your genetic potential is, if your training is not right, if your nutrition is not right, you will never be able to develop as much muscles as you potentially can. So when it comes to nutrition, you need to pay attention. You need to eat enough. So you need the right amount of food. And that means that you need right amount of protein, right amount of fat, and just enough carbohydrates, if any. So you have to be very careful with carbohydrates because natural bodybuilders can get fat easily, but as you're natural, it's going to be much harder to get in shape than if you're enhanced. Also, you need to have proper recovery. You need micronutrient intake. You need enough supply of micronutrients like vitamins, minerals, and other microelements. And they will predominantly be found in foods like eggs, liver, meat, fish, and also in certain supplements. But food is the primary. Sleep is absolutely necessary when it comes to recovery and also hormonal health, which is again directly related to the food that you eat. So you don't need to necessarily eat 6 times, 7 times per day to be obsessed and hysterical about timing of your meals because your body simply doesn't work like that. If you eat 3 meals a day, you just need to make sure that you have enough protein and fat in every single meal. So on the end of the day, the body counts the overall intake of protein, fat, and carbohydrates on a daily basis, not necessarily how many times per day you eat. So you need to provide the body with necessary, sufficient resources to grow. And if you're interested to learn more in detail about right amount of protein, right amount of fat, carbohydrates, and whatever else is important and essential about nutrition, I've written for you a few books on nutrition, so you are more than welcome to download them. Now, the hardest truth about natural bodybuilding is to understand that people are different. Natural bodybuilders are all different. So some people will grow faster, some people will grow slower. Now, hard work matters. Discipline definitely matters. Training matters. Nutrition matters. But biology matters too. You need to understand that you may not be Mr. Olympia. You may never be Ronnie Coleman, Sergio Oliva. You will never be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Because simply these people were different. They have perfect muscle values, perfect hormones, skeletal structure. They were also enhanced. They were professional, and they achieved almost impossible. And this is why there were so few of them, not that many. So It doesn't matter if you don't become Mr. Olympia or you don't become Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sergio Oliva. Absolutely doesn't matter. What matters is that you optimize your genetic potential, whatever that is. So even if you're ectomorph, it doesn't matter. You can still build muscle and look much better in 3 or 5 or 10 years than you're looking now. This is what matters. That you can make yourself be the best self that you can possibly be. Either you are ectomorph, mesomorph, or endomorph. Don't worry about other people. The most important thing is that you become the best self. Now, the purpose is not that you should become somebody else. And perhaps this is what bodybuilding always supposed to be. After more than 40 years in bodybuilding, training over 3,500 clients, competing 46 times, winning 17 titles, I have published for you 13 ebooks with detailed explanation about everything that you always wanted to know about bodybuilding. So if you want to start growing your muscles finally and burning body fat, click on the link in the comments and you can download my ebooks. For the ones who want to learn how to exercise in perfect form, which is especially important for natural bodybuilders, I have created for you Bodybuilding Blueprint course, which is made of 8 videos in which I personally demonstrate and explain the most effective exercises for major muscle groups. So if you want to learn how to train in perfect form and stop wasting time in the gym, click the same link in the comments and you can access my Bodybuilding Blueprint course. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, share the video, send me your comments, and I will see you in the next video.